there is going to be hell to pay for the LDS Church for handling this in such a ham-fisted manner, because there are so many people in the LDS Church who love and idolize and revere Tim Ballard, and Glenn Beck is apparently one, and he's got a big fan base, and a lot of people are going to be reading this. Yeah, can you say schism, boys and girls? I knew you could. Interestingly now, John DeLynn
publicly excommunicating poor Tim Ballard, and that they're giving these media outlets that hate the church, or these publications that write hit pieces on people, how could they give this stuff to these entities that hate the church, its members, and everything they stand for? That's horrible. I'm quitting this church. This church has got me up. That's not what he's saying. He's saying it's preposterous to think that this is going on. So here's some more lying from critics of the church, former apologists who are disgruntled that they were never able to be recognized by the church or move up in CES. So what do? They leave the church and start programs like RFM. That's really what it is. They didn't get promoted. They weren't recognized the way they should be. And so they never had a testimony to begin with. And so they leave the church and they attack it. And this is just another lie, because Glenn Beck is not going against the church. Guess why? Guess what? Glenn Beck's not going against the church, and you want to know why? Because the church never came out and said anything against Tim Ballard. But I just wanted to point out how critics of the church continue to lie. Just recognize these wolves in sheep's clothing. Their tactics suck too. They're not very good at.
It is played by Jim Caviezel. All right. So here now, as things are getting worse and worse for Tim Ballard, President Ballard of the Quorum of the 12, and by President Ballard, I mean the acting president of the Quorum of the 12, that's Russell M. No, that's Russell M. Nelson. M. Russell Ballard. Always get that confused. Here's a statement from this apparent anonymous spokesperson. President Ballard and Tim Ballard, who no relation, they want to add that too. President Ballard and Tim Ballard, no relation, established a friendship a number of years ago. That friendship was built on a shared interest in looking after God's children, wherever they are, and without regard to their circumstance. However, and that's a big however, that relationship is in the past. For many months, President Ballard has had no contact with the founder of Operation Underground Railroad. The nature of that relationship was always in support of vulnerable children being abused, trafficked, and otherwise neglected. Once it became clear Tim Ballard had betrayed their friendship through the unauthorized use of President Ballard's name for Tim Ballard's personal advantage and activity regarded as morally unacceptable. Now, that morally unacceptable phrase is pretty strong language coming from the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles about an individual who has rocketed to fame and has become somewhat of a household name amongst people in the country, amongst people around the world, and certainly amongst members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He has attained hero status in many quarters, and he may have had hero status with President Ballard. The statement was in response to documents obtained by Vice News detailing a criminal investigation into Tim Ballard and his nonprofit. Tim is fully convinced that he is supposed to be the Mormon Messiah and lead people back to the church. So what this is saying here in this news report from Fox is that the statement from the church was in response to documents obtained by Vice News detailing this. And they give this one statement that was in those documents, and which I covered last Friday, as the reason that they're responding to it. I'm not sure that's exclusively the reason. The records reportedly state Tim Ballard received psychic readings and communication from the prophet Nephi to get intel. The church also stated Tim Ballard betrayed his friendship with President M. Russell Ballard, the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Despite sharing the same last name, the two are not related. This is Tim Ballard, I've never used Elder Ballard's name, ever. I've never treaded on his name to ask for anything. I think he has been for a number of years, very famous, especially in conservative circles. He continues to be famous today, and he makes television appearances, etc. Now, he is also a Mormon, and he's not just one of these people who know that Glenn Beck is a member of the LDS Church. So Glenn Beck, who apparently is a friend of Tim Ballard and his Operation Underground Railroad, is going to respond to this condemnation from the LDS Church, and I think it's on Instagram. So let me find this here. Okay, so I've got it here. Let me show it to you. I'm going to read this to you here in a second. But here is Glenn Beck. Hopefully you can see that. Let me check it out. Yeah, I don't know if you can, but regardless of that, I'm going to read it to you right now. So this is Glenn Beck. Now, this is a screenshot of his Instagram page, And as of the time this was screenshot, there were already 131,000 views. And that was as of just after midnight last night. I can only imagine it's ballooned beyond that as of right now. So Glenn Beck, under his official Instagram account, I think it's Instagram, it says @Glenn Beck, things my church never used to do. This is his post. Number 1, effectively excommunicate church members without giving them adequate notice of or an opportunity to respond to accusations. Now, I certainly don't agree with everything that Glenn Beck says, but when he framed it this way, that Tim Ballard, by this public statement of the LDS Church where they condemn him, has effectively excommunicated him. I think this is worse than being excommunicated, actually. So that's an interesting take on it. Number 2, he goes on, number 2, things my church never used to do. Number 2, effectively excommunicate church members by means of public statements issued to the news media by unnamed church spokespersons. Okay, so that individual was unnamed until apparently recently we found out his name, which I just gave to you. Okay. Number 3, things my church never used to do to me. Effectively excommunicate church members through ambiguous but unquestionably damning statements casually provided to publications that hate the church, its members, and everything they stand for. And let me go to the next one, because he's got more. Number 4, things my church never used to do. Number 4, effectively excommunicate church members from church headquarters with neither involvement or notice to local ecclesiastical leaders. Right, so they're effectively excommunicating him without a trial on the local level. And they're doing it from church headquarters with this statement. Number 5, things my church never used to do. Number 5, effectively excommunicate church members through church staff, not priesthood offices. Well, he's got a point there as well. So those are the 5 things that Glenn Beck has posted on his Instagram account about 5 things my church never used to do. There is going to be hell to pay for the LDS Church for handling this in such a ham-fisted manner, because there are so many people in the LDS Church who love and idolize and revere Tim Ballard, and Glenn Beck is apparently one, and he's got a big fan base, and a lot of people are going to be reading this. Yeah, can you say schism, boys and girls? I knew you could. Interestingly now, John DeLynn posts in response.
The sheep's clothing that they use, it's dirty, it's outdated. And they also, one thing about the critics of the church that leave the church is they're stuck mentally back in the time that they left the church. So everything because the spirit's gone. And so they relate everything to that lens that they had when they were a member of the church, like in 2012. And they don't understand or comprehend the progress that we've made in this ongoing restoration. But it's funny because they've taken Glenn Beck's words completely out of context, and they know that. They know that. They are blatant liars. Okay? They're bitter, they're discontented, they're evil, they're just these disgruntled group of nothings, and they stand for an X. They're all about what they used to be, what they formerly used to be, and not anything going forward in life about maybe being pro something or for something. They're only against something. But the funny thing, I don't mean to ramble, but the funny thing is they'll be friends. What do they say? It's the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Even if that enemy of my enemy can sometimes play the role of my enemy. But at this particular time, Glenn Beck is the greatest guy on earth. And so is Tim Ballard. As long as they can make President Ballard look bad, he's the target, right? So they've got allies. Tim and Glenn become their allies when they can attack the church, because the church is the apple of their eye. The church is the pie. Okay? The church is the target. But here's the thing. We're not dumb, RFM and John DeLynn. We know that you've taken Glenn's words out of context completely. So I'm going to show you guys the Twitter. Beck went on, like RFM said, and talked about how things his church doesn't do. He wasn't referring to President Ballard. He wasn't referring to the church. Glenn loves the church. He loves the gospel of Jesus Christ. He was talking about a leak. And these critics, I don't like to give them any clout, like RFM and John DeLynn and Zelf on the Shelf. They're a bunch of dweebs, okay? And they know it. And they can criticize and cry and whine, but if you say anything bad about them, they'll be the first to attack, like big time. Okay, so even Zelf on the Shelf says right here, the spokesperson has been named. The spokesperson has been named. Oh, so it was from the media department. It wasn't President Ballard, RFM, and it wasn't the church. It was somebody within the church. But how many times have we had people that doesn't represent the church? How many times have we had people defect from the church who were once members? You guys, right, RFM, right, John DeLynn? You guys were in prominent positions, worked within the auxiliaries of the church in education. And John DeLynn was in charge of, did things with IT, did many things with IT within the church, knew about how interviews are ran, how the qualifications of becoming a general authority. He got deep into it, and he got into statistics of church buildings and stakes, when stakes are created, when wards are created and split and all that stuff. So Glenn Beck says right here, number 2, effectively communicate church members by means of public statements issued to the news media by unnamed church spokespersons. Okay, somebody possibly leaked something. Effectively communicate church members through ambiguous but unquestionably damning statements casually provided to publications that hate the church, its members, and everything they stand for. Why would the apostles do this? That's not what Glenn Beck was doing. Glenn Beck was not attacking the church. He was talking about a possible leaker, not even a leaker, somebody that's creating a scenario, creating a narrative from nothing. So yeah, not only is Tim innocent, but Glenn is innocent. Tim Ballard responds to condemnation from his own church. He didn't say that. If you watch this interview, he says, I don't know yet. I don't know if it came from somebody from the church. Somebody from the church, or I don't know if it came from the church or not. My bishop doesn't know what's going on. My stake president doesn't know what's going on. So Elder Ballard, President Ballard, because he is the acting president of the Quorum of the 12, did not leak this. And if somebody did, well, look at WikiLeaks 5 years ago. Look at, what did they call it? Mormon WikiLeaks. Who was leaking those meetings? Somebody that probably left the church. I'm not sure if they found out who did that or if somebody admitted to it, but it happens. Okay? It happens. Especially someone that's on the left, or maybe a staunch Democrat that happens to work in the media department. Who knows? So Zelf on the Shelf said the spokesperson has been named. Who are they? I'm not going to their program. But this person said the spokesperson, and I don't know if these are true. The spokesperson sent it from his church email account and is known. Okay, so it had nothing to do with Elder Ballard then. So even though they know this, the anti-Mormons, and I'm going to call them, they are apostates, because that's what Joseph Smith and Brigham Young used to call them. They are defectors, they are dissenters, they are disgruntled. They can't leave it alone. And then they go,
well, of course we don't leave it alone. If you were a part of the church all your life and
well, I'm not Catholic, so I don't talk about Catholics.
Okay, well, guess what? It's funny how Zelf on the Shelf, they film out of their bedroom. Like, I just can imagine, I don't know if it's their mommy and daddy's houses, but I just can visualize one of their parents coming home, and what are they, in their 20s, maybe even hitting 30, I don't know. Are they still in college? Their mom and dad still active in the church, and they're burning their candles and filming for their YouTube channel. I don't know, but the point I'm making is that I grew up in a family that didn't have any standards. I wish I had parents that took me to church. Okay, they did when I was younger, and after they divorced, there was alcoholism and drug addiction and all that stuff. I begged. I loved when home teachers came. I begged for rides to church. Okay, tell that to people that have a lot of crap going on in their lives, and the church is like an oasis in a storm of hell. So anyway, yeah, I don't know who the leaker was, but it was from their email, so it wasn't a general authority, and it wasn't someone that officially represents the church. Well, not maybe by name. They work in the department that maybe represents a title that represents the church, but it's no. So what Glenn Beck, I think what he was trying to say was is that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And he was talking to Vice, and he was talking to Channel 13 and all these other news outlets that are making it look like this came from Elder Ballard. Beware of the lies, folks. Beware of the lies. He's saying right here, it's obvious right here. This is what my church never used to do: effectively excommunicate church members through ambiguous but unquestionably damning statements casually provided to publications that hate the church, its members, and everything they stand for. Yeah, RFM, that's what he's saying. Oh my goodness. Why would the brethren do that? I can't believe that they are publicly excommunicating poor Tim Ballard, and that they're giving these media outlets that hate the church, or these publications that write hit pieces on people. How could they give this stuff to these entities that hate the church, its members, and everything they stand for? That's horrible. I'm quitting this church. This church has got me up. That's not what he's saying. He's saying it's preposterous to think that this is going on.